Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Once again, for about the fourth night and 4 nights in a row, there is just a lot going on in the news. Up ahead, we'll have details about new dangers lurking in the Central American migrant caravan, the one that's just across our southern border tonight in Tijuana. The caravan is not what they told you it was. We'll tell you what it actually is. And then the question of voter suppression. Voter suppression is a phrase you're hearing a lot lately from Democrats. Suddenly it seems like it's 1956 again. But is voter suppression actually happening in America? We have the numbers on that, the conclusive numbers. Plus, with Christmas upon us, the left is mounting an attack on, naturally, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We'll tell you what they're saying about him. But first tonight, the big news. President Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty in federal court today to lying to Congress. Cohen conceded that he was intentionally wrong. He lied about the dates of an abortive Moscow real estate deal when he testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee last year. Cohen's plea was, of course, big news on cable television. The president responded to it as well. He called Cohen, quote, weak and, quote, not a very smart person. Well, that's objectively true, of course. It's also worth asking why anyone would hire a weak, dumb lawyer. Someday we'll get to the bottom of that. But for now, let's consider what we have just learned about how Washington works. Apparently, it's now an enforceable felony to lie to the U.S. Congress. On one level, that is good news. We should take our own laws seriously. Functional countries do that. Nations in decline set up sanctuary cities and ignore their own borders. Nor is it implausible that Michael Cohen might have broken this law or really any other law. Nobody who knows him is shocked by the allegation. If Cohen was accused of running a cannibalism ring, you'd have to at least take the charge seriously. Anything is possible with that guy. So 3 cheers for law and order. The problem is, if you're going to enforce statutes, you have to enforce them fairly and evenly. The law has to apply to everyone. Otherwise, it's not really the law. It's a political weapon. Michael Cohen is facing 5 years in prison for telling Congress something that he knew was false. How often does that happen in Washington? If you watch C-SPAN, you know the answer. Constantly. All the time. There are almost never consequences, by the way. According to one study, between the Second World War and 2007, a total of only 6 people were convicted of lying to Congress. 6 people in 60 years. In other words, the law is not enforced, and that's why people break it so often. Watch this sworn testimony from 2013. This is not someone you haven't heard of. This is the then Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, assuring the Congress under oath that the NSA absolutely does not spy on American citizens.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Yeah. Clapper lied. He's a liar. There's no debate about that. And yet he wasn't charged for lying under oath. In fact, Clapper got richer after he retired. CNN hired him as an analyst. Pretty much the same thing happened to Jim Comey, the former FBI director. In 2017, Comey claimed, again, under oath, that he had never been an anonymous source for news stories while he worked at the FBI. Watch him tell that lie to the Congress.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Yeah, well, according to Comey's longtime deputy who would know, and that would be former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, what Comey said on the tape you just saw is totally untrue. So Comey lied to Congress. But nobody cared. Jim Comey went on to get rich as a pundit selling his book. The same people rooting for Michael Cohen's destruction for lying consider Jim Comey a hero. And then there's former CIA Director John Brennan. Brennan lies constantly. That's well documented. In 2011, for example, Brennan claimed that drone strikes overseas had never, to his knowledge, killed a single non-combatant. That was a total crock. In 2014, Brennan lied and said the CIA had not broken into the computers of Senate staffers. And then last year, under oath before Congress, Brennan said this.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings?
applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No, it was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done.
Yeah, that's a total lie, a flagrant lie, and a significant one about something that affects the life of this country. And yet, you know how the story ends? Brennan was never charged with a felony for lying to the Congress. In fact, just the opposite. Washington rewarded him. Brennan is now an analyst for NBC News. He could be on the air tonight telling you why it's so vitally important that Michael Cohen was charged with lying to Congress. Because we really can't have that. Rule of law, blah, 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 blah. Do you notice a theme here that connects all these stories? Yes, there is one, and it's simple. The well-connected can do pretty much whatever they want. They can lie to the Congress with impunity, and they do. They can lobby for foreign governments without bothering to register, and they do. If they're rich enough, they can even, molest children without being seriously punished. Ask Jeffrey Epstein. He did that. None of this, by the way, is a defense of Michael Cohen. That guy's a creep. He may very well wind up in jail. But if Cohen does wind up in jail, let's hope he's just the first in a long series of prosecutions. If the law is applied to Michael Cohen, then it has to be applied to people who have lied about things that actually matter. Jack Abramoff knows a lot about Washington. He's been here a long time. He's a former lobbyist, and he joins us tonight. Jack Abramoff, you've seen both sides of this. You've been in a position similar to the one Michael Cohen is now, charged with a crime under the lights. And you've also operated freely in Washington. Do you think that I'm overstating the case? Is the law evenly applied in this city?
No, it doesn't seem to be evenly applied or anything close to evenly applied. And I think that this is one of the things that upsets the American people. Everywhere I go when I speak, people now, instead of ranting against corruption as they normally do, they've identified this as really one of the big problems that you have on the left. A series of people, the list is actually too long even to recite on the air, who have seemingly committed unbelievable crimes, the Clinton Foundation, et cetera, and instead of being punished or prosecuted or indicted, they're running for Congress, like Donna Shalala and others. And so I think that it seems certainly that the justice system in America, even under Republican presidents, is geared to go after people on the right and to ignore people on the left. Again, that's not to excuse Michael Cohen. I don't know what his deeds are, and we'll see what they are. But it seems that people on the left who are doing far worse than that, nobody says a thing about them.
It also seems like the slowest gazelle gets eaten. I mean, Michael Cohen is dumb, if I can just say, someone who knows him, and not personally popular, and obviously he's attached to a very unpopular presidential campaign and a very unpopular candidate. And so he seems like a very natural target, whereas someone like Jim Clapper, who's seen as this wise man, this chin-tugging graybeard, can lie about something deeply significant, about breaking the law. The NSA is not allowed to spy on Americans. And he gets a TV contract. I mean, can you think of, in your many years here, your decades here, an example of someone's really powerful being punished for breaking the law?
No, I can't. I can't think of certainly since Watergate, and even the people who were punished in Watergate really weren't very powerful people. Right, exactly. No, and I think that the problem for Michael Cohen is he's a gazelle running in the wrong pack.
Right.
If you were running in the left-wing pack, no matter where he is in that pack, because there aren't exactly brilliant gazelles in that pack either.
Exactly.
But that's a more of a protected pack, it seems, for some reason.
Huh. So that's not, and I just want to be totally clear for the fifth time, I'm not defending whatever crime Michael Cohen is accused of committing, and it sounds like he admitted it, okay? He should be punished. But it does seem like that's corrupt. That's not justice when a law is only applied selectively.
Well, it's corrupt and it's corrosive of the view of our system among the American people. There are a lot of people, even people on the left, I've talked to, who say, it doesn't seem like things are really being fairly applied, particularly the Epstein situation, which is absolutely abhorrent.
Yes.
Here's somebody who is molesting children, it seems, and facilitating the molestation of children by other powerful people, and they cut him a deal for 13 months in a county jail, I guess, where he got to leave the jail 6 days a week. Wow. I mean, somebody...
But they confiscated his address book, I notice. And it's online, and you can look at it, and it's fascinating. And a lot of people you and I know personally are in that address book. I don't think any one of them has ever been charged with anything, even though prosecutors knew exactly who he was hanging out with.
Well, from what they say, the deal that he signed actually protected any potential co-conspirators, which is also astonishing. How do you sign a deal like that? I know plenty of people I was in prison with who would love to have had a deal like that.
That's exactly right. If only you benefited from that. Jack Abramoff, thank you.
Thanks.
An honest man who's been around. Jerome Corsi appeared on this program just the other night to describe what he believes are Robert Mueller's efforts to entrap him.
And the special prosecutors blow you up. They do this, what I call perjury trap. It's really, they ask you a question. They have material they won't show you. You've forgotten about it. They say, you just lied because this email you forgot about in 2016 proves your current memory is wrong. I mean, it's a memory test.
It's disgusting.
And then they accuse you of lying. It's completely rigged, and it's politically driven by Clinton operatives who have an agenda.
Now, of course, he says he's asked his attorney to draft a criminal complaint of his own to bring against Mueller for misconduct. How do we assess all of this? Elizabeth Price Foley is a constitutional law professor at Florida International University College of Law, and she joins us tonight. Elizabeth, thank you very much for coming on. If we take 3 steps back, I'm a little bit surprised at Jerome Corsi at 72. This doesn't seem significant. It seems penny ante, and it doesn't seem related to Russian collusion. What is this telling us?
Well, it's telling us how desperate Mueller and his team has become. After almost 2 years of investigating, spending millions of taxpayer dollars with a team of about 15 really aggressive.
Surprised that this late in the process, we're still talking about Michael Cohen pleading to lying about the date of a perfectly legal real estate transaction that didn't even come to fruition, and Jerome Corsi at 72. This doesn't seem significant. It seems penny ante, and it doesn't seem related to Russian collusion. What is this telling us?
Well, it's telling us how desperate Mueller and his team has become. After almost 2 years of investigating, spending millions of taxpayer dollars with a team of about 15 really aggressive, experienced lawyers, there's no there in terms of substantive evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. So after going hard at high-level Trump confidants and campaign officials, Mike Flynn, George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, and now Michael Cohen, the best they can manage to do is get single counts of perjury out of some of them. So it shows you that these process crimes are all they've got. They don't actually have any evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, which was their mandate.
But they're playing up the term Russia. And by the way, maybe they have videotape of Trump and Putin in the sauna, dividing up the world or something. I mean, who knows? But as of right now, it seems like there's a lot of Russia. They're planning a real estate deal in Russia. And then once you calm down a little bit, you think, well, is that a crime? Actually, why are they telling me this? What does it mean?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not a crime. You're right. I mean, what Michael Cohen supposedly lied about was the timing of Trump Organization's pursuit of this real estate deal in Moscow. He said it ended in January 2016, and now he says it ended in June 2016. But it doesn't matter whether it's January or June of 2016. It was perfectly legal to do so. In fact, it's perfectly legal to do so right now if the Trump Organization wants to do so.
Wait a second. You're saying he was off by 5 months. I mean, that seems like a 5-year sentence to me. Do you think that would be a fair sentence?
I don't know. I mean, ask George Papadopoulos. I think he's serving now 14 days in prison right at this moment for being off by about a month on the timing of his conversation with that Maltese professor, Joseph Mifsud. But it doesn't matter because his Papadopoulos' meeting with Mifsud was perfectly legal to do. Trump Organization's pursuit of a real estate deal in Moscow was perfectly legal to do, even today if they wanted to. So what they've got at the end of the day is just sort of misrepresenting the timing of certain things. Not that they didn't tell the Mueller team about those conversations or those deals. They told them about the substance of them. It's simply the timing of them. But look, it tells you that what's happening here is the Mueller team is sort of hoping that Americans have what I call spaghetti brain, which is that they're unable to disassociate two different lines of thought. One is that the Russians interfered in a very sort of bumbling way with the 2016 election buying those Facebook ads and not being very effective. We admit that they did some of that. That's been documented. But that's one thing. That's one apple. And then the orange is whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to throw the American presidential election. On that issue, there's been absolutely no evidence despite 2 years of very hard investigation. But what the Mueller team and the Democrats on the left are hoping to do is that the Americans will have that spaghetti brain phenomenon where they'll confuse the two and they'll conflate them, so that if you just say Russia, 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 oh, look, they lied about something having to do with Russia, there must be collusion, they say.
I mean, they hacked our election. We're at war. Russia!
Right. It's very McCarthyistic, too. I mean, there's a certain irony here, right, that the new Democrats, when they take over the House in January, are going to be having hearings about all of this, and they're going to start sounding a whole heck of a lot like Joseph McCarthy did. So Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler are the new Joseph McCarthys.
I do this with my dogs with squirrels, so I know what it is. Professor, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight.
Thanks.
Stacey Abrams ran for office in Georgia. She lost fair and square, but she still is not conceding and is filing a new lawsuit instead because voter suppression. Was there any? We've got the numbers. Got a Fox News alert for you. You are looking at live pictures of the president's plane, Air Force One, landing in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Tonight, I think it has just touched down right now. So when he comes out of the plane or if anything interesting happens, obviously we'll go there right away because we're Fox News and we're on it. Want now to sort of tie up, put a bow on the midterm elections. One of the races that we're still talking about is the one that took place in Georgia. The reason we're still talking about it is because one of the candidates has refused to concede, and that has given rise to an extended conversation about something called voter suppression. Turns out that turnout in the Georgia 2018 election was dramatically up over prior midterm years. 57% of registered voters turned out. That compares to less than half in 2010 or 2014. And yet, despite that, the Democrat in the race, Stacey Abrams, says that the election was stolen from her because votes were suppressed. Here's part of what she's saying.
It was not a free and fair election. It was not fair to the thousands who were forced to wait in long lines.
Is he the legitimate governor-elect of Georgia?
He is the person who won an adequate number of votes.
An adequate number of votes. In other words, more votes than Stacey Abrams got. But she still won't concede, and instead her PAC has filed a lawsuit alleging, that phrase again, voter suppression. So what exactly is voter suppression? Richard Goodstein is a lawyer and a former advisor to the Bill and Hillary Clinton family and campaigns, and he joins us tonight. Richard, thanks a lot for coming on.
Sure.
So look, I'm totally opposed to voter suppression. I'm for democracy, and always have been. So I think this is worth looking at carefully. But I'm hung up on this kind of logic barrier. If voter turnout was higher than it had been in the previous two elections, how did voter suppression play a role?
So you're enough of a scientist to know that correlation does not prove causality, right? Let me quote.
What does that mean?
Well, what I mean is there was higher turnout all over the country. And here are 5 things that Republican governors and legislators did to suppress the vote over the past few years. Closed polling places, purged eligible voters. They barred felons, which was overturned in Florida. Voter ID was required, which basically that basically cuts against inner city, often minority voters. And early voting was eliminated in states where early voting typically favored Democrats. So those steps were taken. Notwithstanding that, Kemp won. Congratulations. But that doesn't mean that there was no voter suppression.
Okay,
we know those steps
but actually
were taken.
It does mean that because voter suppression is what it sounds like. It's the suppression of votes. But Stacey Abrams got more votes than any Democrat in 10 years in the state of Georgia. She got more votes than Hillary Clinton got, who was running for president in 2016. And so, I mean, where are the votes that were suppressed? I mean, she got a historic number of votes. I don't understand. So maybe there were attempts made, but they didn't work by definition, right?
I mean, you could have better pitching and still have more home runs, right? Basically, we know that Kemp had tens of thousands of people declared ineligible, and disproportionately those tended to be African Americans.
But no one's claiming they weren't ineligible. They didn't match. The ID didn't. their voter registration did not match the day of voting form, and that's the law in the state of Georgia. So I'm not sure.
That wasn't the only reason. Again, I think there were plenty of other, again, there were polling places that were closed. I mean, there were various steps that were taken. Look, as a general rule.
But will you at least concede that exit polls suggest that African Americans voted in the same proportion they had in previous elections in the state of Georgia? So there was no, exit polling did not detect any drop off in black voting, period. And her numbers, again, were the highest for any Democrat in 10 years. So will you at least concede that maybe voter suppression, if it existed, wasn't very effective?
No, because in every other state, no, because here's why. You can laugh.
Right,
in every
I am
other state,
laughing.
Black vote was up. Right? So the fact that it stayed flat with a black woman at the head of the ticket tells you something was going on to actually suppress it. Yeah, when I say correlation doesn't prove causality, the mere fact that it was flat doesn't mean that it wouldn't have been higher.
Are black people required to vote for black candidates?
Of course not. They tend to.
Oh, they tend to. Is that? But that's not the law. Should it be the law? Is that what you're saying? What are you saying?
I'm saying we know statistically African Americans don't like Donald Trump. They actually did like Stacey Abrams.
Actually, African American men like Donald Trump more than they like Mitt Romney. That's true.
Well, back in 2016, I don't think that's the case anymore.
Okay, we'll see.
We'll find out as well.
All right, Richard, great to see you.
Thank you.
Failed presidential candidate and doomsday prophet Al Gore recently blasted the president as a supervillain who is solely to blame for global warming. Watch this.
Donald J. Trump is now the face of climate denial. And there are those who are still giving him their loyalty and trust, and I get that, believe me, but the vast majority of Americans, not to mention all around the world, are really kind of, they've had it.
So tonight, the head of California's Democratic Party, Eric Bauman, pictured here, announcing publicly that he will resign amid allegations of sexual misconduct. He was accused by 10 political activists and staff members of engaging in unwanted touching, making crude sexual comments, other lewd acts. So it raises the question, whatever happened to the Congressional Hush Fund that paid to settle allegations of sexual abuse by members of Congress and used your taxpayer money to do it? A new bill is underway that would lift that veil of secrecy, and it could be one of Nancy Pelosi's first tests if she wins her speaker battle. Here she is earlier this year on this.
I think that the elected officials, the members of Congress, should be held accountable. I think there's possibly legislation that says that anybody who has done this or does it in the future, this will be made known to the public, as long as the victim agrees to that.
And you would support that?
Yeah, for sure.
For sure, she said. Joining me now, Penny Nance, Concerned Women for America CEO and president, who has written an editorial that is about to be published about this. Penny, welcome. Good to have you with us this evening. Now, this is something that Congressman Ron DeSantis supported a lot. There was a lot of lip service given to making this public information, this hush fund with taxpayer money. Where do we stand on that?
Nowhere. Nothing happened. We're 1 year later, Martha, and we still do not know which members used approximately $17 million of the taxpayer funds. There's 264 cases, and we don't know who they were. And we believe at Concerned Women for America that the taxpayer has a right to know. We want to know who we covered up for, and there needs to be restitution. And so you mentioned a legislation earlier. Ron DeSantis, who has now been elected as governor of Florida, will be leaving. We'd love for Congress to clear this up in this last few minutes, but, you know, we don't think that'll happen. But this then falls on the plate of Nancy Pelosi. And let's see if she's serious. We don't just want to know the names of the members of Congress. We want restitution, whether this is coming from their paychecks now or even people that have retired. It's coming through their congressional pension.
Yeah, I mean,
think
it's a
the
great
taxpayers
question.
are right to know.
You know, and as you point out, there's, you know, this whole new freshman class that has a lot of women in it, and we would expect that they will be leading the charge on this, and we're going to be watching, as I know you will as well. Let's put up some of the people that we do know the names of who were accused and left their positions on Capitol Hill. They were accused and left, all except for Bobby Scott, who was just reelected. He was accused, and we should point out that accused and convicted are two different things, but the others left under those circumstances. You know, so with regard to who pays for this, Is there discussion that perhaps this should come out of personal pockets? And that the American people, this really isn't their problem, isn't our problem to pay for these issues?
It isn't our problem. You're right about that, and we are strongly advocating that point, that if a member of Congress acts badly, and mostly this is what we know about, and we don't know very much, but what we know about, we have issues like John Conyers, who was trying to host meetings in his underwear with his staff. We have Blake Farenthold, who was sharing, and for $84,000, by the way, for Blake Farenthold, was sharing his sexual fantasies about his comms director. And when she had the audacity to complain, they fired her. And then you have other people like Eric Massa from New York, who was sexually harassing young men in his office and called it a tickle fight. I mean, this isn't just a offhanded comment. These are very serious allegations and misdeeds by the powerful against the weak. As a former staffer on Capitol Hill, as the mother of a daughter in her 20s, this will never change until we hold people accountable, until these allegations see the light of day, and the voter can decide and really make a
Absolutely.
change.
I mean, we're going to watch. We'll see what Nancy Pelosi does. We'll see what all of these freshman women who have come in, whether or not they will take up this charge. And as you said, all of these people raise money to run for office. So perhaps some of those donors would like to cover these costs, because I don't think you or I or anybody else in this country feels like it's right for this to come out of our pocket. Penny, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight.
Thank you. You too. God bless.
So still ahead this evening, a one-time billionaire bigwig with a horrific record of alleged sex crimes, speaking of that, used his connections to the rich and powerful to dodge the most severe punishment that he faced. But today we found out that this story is not ending there. Investigative reporters at the Miami Herald have dug into a long dormant story, and what they found about Jeffrey Epstein, the one-time billionaire hedge fund manager turned sex offender, could blow the whole sordid tale wide open once again. You may remember this story. Epstein, who served only 13 months in prison, is still involved in 2 pending civil suits. In one set that is set to go to trial next week, the young women, who are now grown women, say that they were assaulted by him and that they are now speaking out, and they want to be heard to tell all that they know about what went on behind these gates in his home in Palm Beach, Florida. Trace Gallagher, live now from our West Coast newsroom with the full report tonight. Trace, good evening.
Good evening, Martha. These civil cases are significant because back in 2008, Jeffrey Epstein's alleged victims were shut out of the legal process altogether. They were not allowed to testify or even give character witness statements. Stunning, considering the litany of horrifying allegations laid out by the Miami Herald, including the paper identifying some 80 women who say that from 2001 to 2006, they were molested or sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. And FBI and court records show that Epstein put together a network of underage girls and forced them to perform sex acts at his Palm Beach mansion. He was also suspected of trafficking minors from overseas to sex parties at his various homes around the world. Prosecutors identified 36 underage victims. So how does a man facing a 53-page indictment and life in a maximum security federal prison end up serving 13 months in a private wing of the Palm Beach County Jail, being allowed to leave his cell 6 days a week to go to work? Well, the answer, according to the Herald, is current Labor Secretary and potential Attorney General nominee Alexandra Acosta, who in 2007 was Miami's top prosecutor and accepted a deal called a non-prosecution agreement, where Epstein pleaded guilty to prostitution charges in state court and in turn got immunity from federal charges. The deal also protected Epstein's accomplices from prosecution, meaning if other well-known influential people were having sex with minors, they would not be identified or prosecuted. And again, the alleged victims had no recourse. A lawyer representing victims said, quote, "The damage that happened in this case is unconscionable. How in the world do you, the U.S. attorney, engage in a negotiation with a criminal defendant, basically allowing that criminal defendant to write up the agreement?" The answer might be a quid pro quo. Remember, this happened back in 2008 at the height of the global financial crisis, and Epstein gave unknown known information to investigators regarding 2 executives with Bear Stearns, which failed in 2008. Alexander Acosta would later say he felt pressured by Epstein's powerful legal team, including Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr, though the Herald believes Acosta had a good working relationship with Epstein's legal team, including private email communications and negotiations to lessen jail time. But 10 years later, Epstein may yet find himself back in a federal courtroom. Martha.
Thank you very much, Trace Gallagher in Los Angeles. Here now, Charles Hurd, opinion editor at The Washington Times and a Fox News contributor, and Juan Williams, co-host of The Five and Fox News political analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. You know, I mean, we all remember this story, and the details of it were just incredible. I mean, you know, he had all these places all around the world and these underage girls that were brought in, and his friends, you know, high-powered, big names, many of them. And, you know, it was just, when you heard that he got 13 months, it was a little hard to imagine that all of those charges could boil down to that. And now you read this piece, very good reporting by the Miami Herald, Juan, and you look at this and you look at the Me Too moment that has followed, really wasn't underway in full swing, I guess you could say, at that point. What do you make of this story?
Well, the politics of it just stand out, because this is not really about, you know, what we would normally think of as a plea deal. This is really about the politics and the power, the connection. You know, I'm reminded of, you know, O.J. Simpson or Harvey Weinstein, Martha. I don't think that there's equal justice when you have the kind of power, money, and connections that these people have. And that's what you see with Jeffrey Epstein. So recently, Dianne Feinstein, when Alex Acosta was nominated to be Labor Secretary, did not vote for him based on this. But she didn't have all the information. It's in the Miami Herald story that we're now learning. And it is incredible to me, the number of people, the number of young women who were abused. They were often poor young women, lured to his house with offers of money, then a pyramid scheme in which they were paid additional funds to bring in other unsuspecting young women. And the bottom line here is that Epstein basically got away with it because the young women were not told about the plea deal. They couldn't go into court and challenge the idea that this man, who was facing potentially a life sentence, was only getting 13 months and, as you just heard from Trace, able to leave 6 days a week.
Yeah, which is unbelievable. I mean, basically wasn't in prison at all. I mean, he was allowed to leave and go to work 6 days a week. You know, Charlie, this was done at a breakfast arrangement between Mr. Acosta and the attorneys. And, you know, Acosta at that hearing said, in response to what Juan just brought up, you know, we wanted to make sure he did time. And that's why this settlement was made. We wanted to make sure that he did time. Part of this arrangement, and then I want to get your response, Charlie, of course, but is that these girls, 14-year-old girls, were determined to be prostitutes. You know, yeah. I don't know how you can have that label at the age of 14.
No, you can't. No. There's and there's no you know, there's no definition in federal law that allows for that either, and it shouldn't have been allowed in this case. It really is, you know, and we don't know what sort of everything that went on behind the scenes, but this right here is exactly why people despise politics. It's why so many Americans have an eroded faith in the federal government, is because of things like this. And as I think Juan very ably pointed out, you know, if there, you know, there's a dual system of justice in this country, and the idea that this guy has so much money and he has so many political connections that he can get away with something that should have put him in jail absolutely for the rest of his life, and he should have lost every penny that he's ever made in his life. It's absolutely despicable. And I think, and by the way, you know, it's politics. It's on both sides. There's, or I should say, all around. And the idea that, and I do think that Alex Acosta and everybody inside the DOJ who had any fingerprints whatsoever on this should be forced to step forward and explain what happened. And if indeed there were problems with the prosecution that made it difficult to envision getting a conviction where he would see a long prison sentence, well, my goodness, go ahead and push the case and reveal all of what those problems are. But to just short circuit it and not allow these young women, these girls, to stand in front of who willingly wanted to stand in front of the monster who allegedly did these things to them, and to confront him is such a miscarriage of justice.
They may get their opportunity, and the Me Too movement,
I hope they do,
has perhaps opened a door with these 2 new charges that may allow them to get their moment. You know, some of them are moms now; they're a lot older. They've gone on with their lives, but they would like to see justice done in this case, and we will be watching it. Gentlemen, thank you. Great to see both of you tonight. So coming up next, the first federal prosecutor to take on child predators inside the Catholic Church. Detailed the devastating report out of Pennsylvania on priest abuse, and with states across the country now taking on similar investigations, this story is far from over. But long before the report was made public, my next guest knew there was a serious problem that was going on. Former U.S. Attorney David Hickton is a Catholic who attended a Catholic school where some of the accused predator priests were assigned. Decades later, he would become the very first federal prosecutor to go after the Catholic Church and help successfully put away 2 priests. Tonight, he is looking forward at what must happen now to protect children and to fix the church that he loves. David Hickton served as U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania from 2010 to 2016 and is the founding director of the University of Pittsburgh Institute for Cyber Law, Policy, and Security. David, thank you very much. Good to have you with us tonight. This is personal for you. When you were in grammar school, some of your friends on the basketball team, little boys, after practice would tremble at the end of practice. Why would they do that?
Well, I described that story because we had a predator coach who was engaged in behavior that we now see is all too often discovered in many schools. So I don't think my experience is that much different than many people who went to Catholic school. We're just all finding out about it. I knew about it then. It came and went, and it was always in my mind as something that was very disturbing. I was not personally a victim, but certainly we were all a part of the same team, and I carried it with me for a long time.
You did not give up your faith. Some people who have experienced this or know people who have do. You say that you sometimes get sideways glances at church. Why?
Well, I think when I went after some of the priests, we had a conviction here in Pittsburgh and one in Johnstown, and then I very publicly announced that I was going to impose a RICO investigation on the church. I think some people were so imbued with the church cover-up for so many years that they saw what I was doing was an attack on the church. And whenever that happened, I would quickly tell people that what I was doing was the right thing to do. It was the correct thing to do. It was legally, ethically the right thing to do. But the problem was not created by me. It was created by the church. And I think that reaction from some Catholics is one of the reasons we're still talking about this problem, which is 5 decades old.
Yeah. There's a nun that you say is the reason that you maintained your faith all throughout, and we have a picture of her. Why was she so important in your life?
Well, Sister Marlene Luffy was a huge figure in my life. She taught me in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade. She was my French teacher, and she was the principal, and she remains a close friend today. In fact, when I was sworn in as U.S. Attorney, she spoke and said the prayers at the investiture ceremony. But, you know, the Catholic Church is just a vehicle for the expression of your faith. It does not represent your faith. And it's, like many institutions, composed of good and bad, good people and bad people, and the Catholic Church does a lot of good. Sister Marlene represents the high watermark of the good of the Catholic Church, at least in my experience, and she has been a huge positive impact on me, a great developer of whatever foundation exists that has allowed me to live a successful and happy life.
A lot of people have similar stories about special nuns and priests in their lives. Before I let you go, what's the one thing that you would tell the Vatican or the hierarchy in this country they need to do now?
They need to admit that these were crimes against children. There were crimes in the cover-up. I think we need to get a clean slate and move forward. I'd be an advocate for giving women a greater role in the leadership in the church and perhaps making women as priests. I think that would go a long way.
David Hickton, I hope you'll join us again, sir. Thank you very much. Good to have you with us tonight. So coming up next, an incredible show of patriotism from thousands of total strangers who all gathered to honor one of our nation's veterans who had no family. Thousands of strangers showed up to pay tribute to an American hero. That was the story in Omaha, Nebraska on Tuesday, after an obituary for Vietnam veteran Stanley Stoltz read that he had no known family. Word quickly spread around town, leading to an outpouring of support from a patriotic community with as many as 2,000 people showing up to honor this veteran for his service to our nation. Here now is one of those supporters, Mary Rosenthal, Vice President of First Responders Foundation. Mary, thank you very much for being here this evening. It's good to have you. We should mention that we now understand that there was a brother who did arrive at this gathering, but the larger point is just the need to make sure that in this moment, our veterans are shown the kind of support and love that our nation has for them, right?
Right. Omaha is such a strong, compassionate, thankful, patriotic community because we have Offutt Air Force Base, which is right outside Omaha. It's home of the U.S. Strategic Command, and the citizens of Omaha have just completely supported the military, both past, present, and then the people who will serve in the future as well.
And I know that the person who was overseeing this ceremony said, you know, occasionally we'll get 15, 20 people who will come whenever they hear that a veteran is being buried. Why 2,000? How did this happen?
You know, I think with social media, you know, people will put out things on Twitter and Facebook. I put things out, and I was surprised that I had people from West Virginia and all over the country that were retweeting it as well. With the social media, it's easier to reach people. And like I said, once you put this out in front of the citizens of Omaha, they're going to be there. They're going to be there to support this veteran.
What would you tell people who watch this and they say, I would like to do that in my community. I would like to be present for someone who may not have anybody there for them?
Well, the first thing is to find out when there's a veteran in the situation. I mean, we were lucky that somebody posted the obituary on social media, and it just kind of went viral from there. But as soon as people can find out about it and they can spread the word, I don't think there's any community in the United States that wouldn't come out in droves to support something like this.
Yeah, we just put on the screen the notification that said that Private Stoltz had no known family. And it's just moving to read those words and to see the flag next to it, and it was put out by the funeral home. You know, what's your message to people across this country when they look at that and they read his name and they think about so many others out there who have given their lives or given their service to our country?
Right. I think for most people, they have a deep appreciation for the military, for what they do, for the ones that didn't come home. And so when you have somebody that doesn't have any